All right, we welcome on Patrick James, MLB writer and editor, also writes for the Boshamer Bulletin. Patrick, welcome on.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. So we wanted to bring you on, and the Super Regionals are starting on Saturday. That'd be June 11th. So North Carolina and Arkansas. I wanted to get into a preview with that. But first, I just wanted to ask you about was when North Carolina was starting this season, did you believe, or what was the perception around the team that like they can make it to this level? Was there a perception around this team that, hey, they're going to be in the Super Regionals and 2 games away from going to the College World Series?
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting question because I think from an outside perspective, for sure, there's a lot of doubt around this team and what it could be. I mean, very few national outlets picked UNC to even make it to the NCAA tournament. Picked, I think it was fifth or sixth, I can't remember, in the preseason coaches poll in the coastal division of the ACC. So I mean, not a whole lot of outside expectations, but it was one of those things. I was thinking about this, coming off the regional this past weekend, where personally, my own opinion coming into this year is that I felt like a super regional was maybe the high point for this team. I thought they were very capable of making that, specifically due to just some additions that they made over the course of the offseason. They had a lot of returning talent from last year, especially in the lineup. But then you bring in guys such a Vance Honeycutt, who's obviously kind of taken college baseball world by storm here these last couple of weeks. I saw him early on in the fall and knew right away that he was going to be a super impact player for this team. Guys such as Alberto Osuna coming in, the National Junior College Player of the Year last year, big time slugger. I mean, just absolute video game numbers at Walter State last season. I mean, they're insane, like 120 RBIs.
Right.
Like you don't see that.
Right.
So just, with some of those additions they made, then, the big thing, the biggest question at all surrounding this team was the pitching staff.
Right.
And, you lost your big workhorse in Austin Love, who, down the stretch last season was about as good as any UNC pitcher I've seen in person. So that was a big loss. He got drafted in the third round by the Cardinals, but, they did a really good job having a lot of guys develop. You had a few guys come in, as well as, a guy such as Max Carlson, whose year got cut short last year because of elbow surgery. But at the same time, you saw a lot of guys, especially who are in bullpen roles, take a lot of steps forward and have been able to eat some innings and just get better over the course of the year. I mean, chief among them being Davis Palermo, who's out there, closing things out for UNC in that regional there on Monday night. So, yeah, it's kind of a wild journey. And then, that doesn't even go into the fact just, how up and down this year has been in general for this team.
I think the national perception of North Carolina as a school is obviously the basketball aspect of it. Also with Sam Howell, football has become I wouldn't say powerhouse, but they're definitely more recognizable on the football too. But just speaking about the baseball team and this year, where do you feel like the baseball team can shift that perception that North Carolina is just a basketball or football school?
It's funny there too, just because, UNC, you start with that 06 stretch there where, when UNC was in the College World Series there, and almost every year there for, a 7-year span. I think they made 6 or 7 there between 2006 and 2013. In these last few years, I mean, from 14 on, still a solid program, a few College World Series appearances there, 2018 there. I was fortunate to be able to cover that team. So there's definitely, you can't say that UNC is a baseball school. It's not like a Vanderbilt or something like that, but there is an interest around it. There is a tradition around it. And so it's something that, it is hard for UNC to combat there, especially where, almost every year, basketball takes up the first half of the season.
Right.
So you definitely do see, once the basketball season ends there in early April, a lot of interest build, which is, why I initially started my own publication covering the team, the Boshamer Bulletin, like you mentioned, because there is an interest there, and it's nice that, the other thing is, though, there are a lot of spring sports here that are also really good. So I mean, it's kind of tough. Like there's a lot of competition for, eyeballs in this area.
Right.
But I think, one easy way to look at it is, if you're bringing in kids like Vance, for example. I mean, not only is he a superstar, but he is a legacy guy. Both his mom and his dad were student athletes here at UNC. And I mean, he's just sensational. I mean, he can do it all. He's the sort of guy who, can be the face of UNC baseball, I think, for 3 years here and just continue building even more interest.
Gotcha. I'm going to shift into the matchup. Begins Saturday, game one. What are you expecting from game one? I know I believe I saw a tweet last time North Carolina faced Arkansas, that Arkansas beat them. Is that what the tweet was? I don't have it right up with me right here right now, but I
Yeah,
believe. Go ahead.
it's funny. Only one time these two teams ever played each other, and it was in the 1989 College World Series. The Razorbacks, they won that one 7-3 at Rosenblatt Stadium. It's funny enough that I tweeted that stat out there on Monday night after the game. That's the same score that UNC won the regional by to finish it off. So everybody's like, "Hey, 7-3 is actually looking like a good number right now."
Right.
The funny part about that is UNC's current director of baseball operations, Dave Arendis, was a starter on that UNC team. So there's a connection there. There's also, as again, Vance, his name coming up. His dad, Bobby, was also a member of that 1989 Tar Heel team. So it's just kind of funny how, here we are, 33 years later, and there's still sort of that symmetry there a little bit. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, you really don't see a whole lot of, outside of super regionals, you don't see UNC playing many other SEC teams during the year outside of that annual trip against, South Carolina and Charlotte. So there's always excitement when you can kind of get these sort of matchups involved. And obviously, you go back 3 years ago, UNC season ended here in the super regionals against another SEC team there in Auburn. So it's just kind of funny how in some ways things come full circle, especially for some of these guys who are, fourth year seniors or fourth year juniors, technically, who are still hanging around, who are from that team.
What if you had to give a prediction? Are you this game going 3? Is this going to be a tightly, like, are you going to see games that are finishing like 2-1? Or should we expect some fireworks? I know Arkansas goes, like, they can produce 10 runs a game whenever they want, but should we expect North Carolina to hang with them? What is your general prediction of this? Is it going 3 runs scored? Just give me your rundown of that prediction for the series.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, I would almost expect to go 3 because just the way this season has gone. I would be surprised if it wasn't something that this UNC team really has to work for. And same for Arkansas. I mean, just based on what I've looked at myself, kind of reading up on them, is they've also kind of had their ups and downs throughout the year. I mean, they obviously had their top arm. Who's, I believe, a top 50 draft prospect for this upcoming year. I mean, they lost him to Tommy John surgery before the season even started. So a lot of obstacles that they've also had to overcome. But I mean, you saw it last weekend where, the two highest, most offensive regionals were the Chapel Hill regional and the Stillwater regional that Arkansas came out of. I mean,
Yep.
you said it. I mean, Arkansas, they've hit 98 home runs on the season. UNC is up to 100. That's 8 shy of the program record for a single season. And again, that was with the old bats that record was set back in 2002. I mean, it's kind of absurd. I mean, we can get into a whole other conversation about the balls and everything. We don't need to go that far.
I was gonna say, we bring in juice balls to college baseball.
But there is, I mean, the ball, I mean, it really has been sailing out of the Bosch here these last couple of weeks, and obviously, you've seen where UNC's lineup, I mean, really since Vance Honeycutt started heating up here, beginning with the NC State series there on May 6th. I mean, it's really just taken off. I mean, averaging close, I think 8.5 runs per game or so in that span. I mean, earlier in the year, I mean, before that, they were averaging probably about 6.2 or so. It was somewhere in that area. So it's definitely taken a massive leap forward. And it's just kind of funny how that shaped out because, while Vance, comes in, was sensational there the first month plus of the year, kind of tapered off there a little bit, kind of adjusting, as other teams were adjusting to him as a true freshman. But during that time, you saw the rest of the lineup sort of round into shape a little bit. So once he finally hit his stride again, it's really just kind of allowed it to be, sort of lineup, as I was talking about earlier, that, we all thought it could be in many ways.
Right.
And like you said, I mean, a lot of firepower there on the Arkansas side. And, they also have some similar questions about the starting pitching. I mean, UNC is really, and this is where I would give UNC a little bit of advantage there is that, Max Carlson and Brandon Schaefer have really emerged as the 1-2 punch that UNC thought they could be coming into this year. Both of them had their ups and downs where Max, kind of in a tough spot where, as I said earlier, had that off-season elbow surgery last May,
Mm-hmm.
had to work through that, didn't start actually throwing like live until the beginning of January. The fact that he was even able to make it for opening day, I mean, for that first weekend was pretty remarkable. I don't think anybody really expected that. And he just kind of, had to work through some things over the course of the year to kind of, look really sharp there early, had a major blister. Like, I mean, Coach Gaines, the UNC pitching coach, said he'd never seen a blister like that. And that really threw him off there for, I think, a little bit of the middle part of the season. But, he's really rounded into form here down the stretch. I mean, Brandon Schaefer, I mean, he's been absolutely unbelievable the last couple of weeks, looking like the guy. I mean, there were times I saw him in the preseason where I was like, I mean, this guy is going to be, one of the top pitchers in the ACC this season. I mean, he's not going to overpower you by any means. It's 88 to 92 really with the fastball, but it's extremely deceptive. And, he hits his spots, and he's been doing that, especially here as of late. I think it's a 2.88 ERA over his last 5 starts. Obviously, one of those being that incredible complete game effort against that Virginia Tech team. That was, obviously it is unbelievable. I mean, such a great offense.
Right.
And, pitching on short rest there, on 1 day's rest there, and the regional clincher there on Monday. So I think the two of them do give UNC a little bit of advantage. I mean, Arkansas, they've kind of, with that injury that I mentioned, seem to be kind of, having to try some different things here over the course of the year. But, if it goes to that game 3, you're kind of in that spot where, both teams looks like they'll be rolling out. UNC as of late, it's been Will Sandy there in the 3rd game, but at the same time, I mean, it could be that you see like 5 or 6 guys in that game. Like, I think it's the
Right.
same way for Arkansas too.
Right.
So it's going to be quite interesting if it does get to 3.
Gotcha. I just want to wrap up with this question. What if you had to like be nitpicky or just pick one thing that fans or like reporters or anyone who hasn't been familiar with the super regional or North Carolina team, like what is one thing you would pick out for them to look for in this game? Or
This might be,
series.
I'll say like, an underrated aspect maybe of this
Okay.
UNC team is its defense, which I know is kind of like a weird thing to talk about when you talk about baseball, because it's like one of those things like you kind of look at and you're like, okay, like they're all right. They're not throwing the ball all over the place. It's not a circus. But at times though, it's funny, you go back to the first, 2 or 3 weeks of the season and, there were some circus plays out there that kind of had you, scratching your head a little bit. And, you talk to anybody with this UNC program, I mean, the mantra always is, pitching and defense.
Yep.
And, early on, like I said, there were some issues there, just some weird plays. But, you've had Hunter Stokely step in early March. He's been the primary first baseman for most of the year, has been sensational. I know that's kind of odd to say about a first baseman. I think that kind of goes overlooked at times, but he does a great job picking the ball. And then you saw here in about like mid-May, I think it was May 11th, UNC insert Colby Wilkerson in as the starting second baseman. He's a guy in the 9 hole who, not a whole lot of, major offensive contributions so far, had a really good game in the first game of regionals. But aside from that, he's just a guy in there who offensively is just going to grind out bats, put down some sacrifice bunts, nothing major, can do the little things for you. But defensively, he is a major difference maker. I mean, there was a ball in that Friday game against Hofstra, the opener, where it was in the hole and, there was a runner on second. He ranged over and got it. I turned to everybody in the press box and I was like, he's the only guy on this team who can make that play. And there were times and times again throughout the season where that play in particular was one that UNC just didn't make, and it came back to bite him. And, in that instance, if he doesn't get that ball, a run definitely would have scored in that instance. It would have been 3-1 Hofstra at that point. And who knows what happens?
Right.
So just the way the defense has come along, it's something that, I mean, even, VCU's head coach, I thought was really interesting when he got up there for his post-game press conference there on Monday night after their final loss of the season. He got up there and did the usual, credit North Carolina for, playing a good series. And he kind of stopped himself. He's like, that's a really good defensive team. That was the first thing he said. He made a point of saying that. And I just thought, given how this team has grown over the course of the year, if you haven't followed it all
Right.
year long, it might not be something you're as aware of, but like now, I mean, that's a real strength of this team, and I think could be a major difference maker this weekend.
All right, Patrick, thanks for joining us. That'll be it for this episode of The Throwdown. We'll catch you guys next time.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click here for more videos and subscribe.
And for more exclusive and prime content, head to bvmsports.com.